my name is Zeus Tipado, a writer for Healing Maps, and let's talk about psychedelics in 2050. But first, can I get a futuristic backdrop? It's better. What will psychedelics look like in the future? That's a massive question filled with an enormous amount of possibilities. As we approach 2050, the scope of our understanding of psychedelics will expand, which means outdated perceptions of these psychedelics will obviously shift. So which outdated perceptions am I talking about? Well, it may be controversial, but I think we'll see PCP as an emerging psychedelic in the future. Yes, I really said PCP, also known as phencyclidine. PCP is an NMDA antagonist, somewhat similar to ketamine, and it produces relatively the same subjective effects, or trip, as ketamine. You always hear PCP being associated with intense violence. Heck, the stigma of PCP is so embedded in our culture that when anything is amped up beyond normal levels, it's always on PCP. Like, it's football, but on PCP, or it's a burrito, but on PCP. However, there's no real evidence that PCP makes a person violent as much as an eighth of shrooms makes a person into a violent maniac. All of that is just leftover propaganda from the 70s and 80s. And the fact that the psychedelic PCP still has all this baggage nearly 50 years later, it's evidence of how effective the propaganda actually was. In fact, we found that PCP can actually be used for pain management at low doses. And in the future, I'm sure society will actually find a place for PCP. But moving past our own attitudes towards psychedelics, what will the advancements in neuroscience look like when applied to the psychedelic scene? In the future, designer neuroreceptors could be implanted in the brain that are built to interact with designer psychedelics. Sounds wild, but like it's not even that far-fetched. It's actually already here. It's called DREAD. DREAD stands for Designer Receptors Exclusively Activated by Designer Drugs. It's a tool in neuroscience used to interact with specific neurons in the brain, and it's pretty cyberpunk, as it represents the greatest biohacking science has achieved thus far. Whoa. Implanting receptors in your brain sounds dangerous because it is dangerous. This ain't a Cronenberg movie, man. However, with DREADs, you can implant these designer receptors without surgery. Wait. Implanting without implantation? How? Well, leave the scalpel, pick up the boombox, because you can do it with sound. Insanely precise sound. Ultrasound, actually. The DREAD is injected from a syringe to your arm. Then it's carefully guided up to your brain with ultrasound. Once it reaches its destination, DREADs can be manipulated through the frequency of the ultrasound. It would bubble up until it crossed the blood-brain barrier, and the designer receptors would attach to the neurons in specific brain areas. The process is called chemogenetics. Once these new receptors are attached to your neurons, you can activate or deactivate them with a new psychedelic, much like how the psychedelic MDMA activates serotonin receptors. But with DREADs, you can pick any part of the brain you want to activate, build some receptors that attach to that part, and create a psychedelic that interacts with those custom receptors. Basically, unlimited access to unlimited parts of your brain at any time. DREADs and other emerging innovations in neuroscience will undoubtedly pave the path for a very interesting psychedelic future.